Yo, what's going on, guys? HyperX here. Today we are going to be talking about The Last of Us Part 1. There are various naming permutations. We'll discuss this in a minute, but I'm joined by Paradise. How you doing, mate?
I am so excited to talk about this one. I've had such a good time playing through it, so we're going to answer the questions that we think everyone would have, my impressions as well. And I will also disclaim, I really enjoy The Last of Us. It's obviously a game that's been out for a while. Then they released the remaster, as we know. I think I played through the remaster 3 or 4 times over the last few years. So
Paradise is the Last of Us fan in the channel, in the team. Paradise is the last, whether it be survival games, horror games, zombie games, anything like that. Paradise is the #1 fan, but Last of Us is a big one for you.
It is, yeah. I will say it technically not a zombie game as well.
No, this is true. I want to get roasted. I wasn't trying to, just to be clear to the comments, I wasn't trying to imply Last of Us was a zombie game. I was merely explaining Paradise's credentials. But yeah, it's true. You are very right. They are not zombies. But this is, so basically, recently had a chance to, obviously Paradise has been playing through The Last of Us Part 1. I said interesting naming convention because this is not to be confused with the remaster, which of course we already had in the past. This is more a full-scale remake, which we'll touch on in the video, but of course it's still true to the original game, not like a Final Fantasy VII remake Part 1, yes, because that was different. This gets hella confused. I feel like the industry needs to sit down and say, alright, are we using the word remake, remaster, reimagining, re-envisioning? It's crazy. Anyway, besides the point, let's begin from the top. For anyone that is watching this and they're like, well, I've heard of Last of Us already, just give us a quick summary. Last of Us Part 1, what is this version that you've been playing through?
So, in terms of this, this is the thing, okay? People will already, or should already know what The Last of Us is. It's a story. It follows Joel and Ellie. We actually will have gameplay Part 1 already out on the channel. So if you want to see the very beginning of the game, that will be on there. If you haven't seen it before, but essentially you're going through the world with as Joel with a girl called Ellie, and there's a reason why you're protecting her, and you're trying to get her to the Fireflies, which are a group of survivors that seem to have the answers and seem to have things they have a goal to fix the infected situation, and so you need to get Ellie to them, and it's all about the journey together to getting to the Fireflies, and there's all twists and turns and there's crazy things that happen, as many people that have played the game will know. But I do want to circle back on the fact that this is the remake, right? So as we said before, you got the original game, then you have the remaster, which was updated textures and fidelity, and this one is basically a ground up remake using PlayStation 5's engine technology that Naughty Dog have been working on, basically. So what that means is the visual fidelity of the game is greatly improved. Think of Last of Us Part 2, and you play that game and it's whether you like the game or not, I don't think you can deny that the game visually
that
really
game was incredible. I mean, Naughty Dog are one of those studios that are the gold standard when it comes to just visual fidelity. But yeah, that Last of Us Part 2, some of those visuals were crispy.
And one of the things that I really appreciated in Part 2 was the characters and their faces and the expression that they have, and in certain parts of the story, the grittiness and you get dirty in an apocalypse scenario, and when you play through this Part 1 remake, you are going to see that in it as well. You're going to see the characters. Some of them will look completely different. They're still the same character, but they will actually look like almost an entirely new person. They'll look just in terms of the fidelity, they will look better, which I really, really like. It brings the emotion to life. I will say as well, Ellie looks more like the voice actor, Ashley, and I think that is fantastic. They've basically sort of made her a little bit more like the actual voice actor, and it was also motion captured, remember, as well. So I think that was a really strong choice. But on top of that, some of the actual areas and levels, although they are generally the same, and you're still going through the same the same map to get from A to B, it's not the plot has changed, but some areas are different. Objects will be different, the way that you climb on top of a building might be different. So there are these minor differences where a whole area has changed, and you might not recognize it unless you go back and play the original or the remaster to really to really notice the difference. And of course, being on PlayStation 5, we have the DualSense wireless features as well, so you get that feedback in the shots and things. And if you've played, like, I've played PS5 for a while now, right? So I've kind of got used to those features and they feel a bit more natural to me now. But when you switch between before and after, you really do feel it on the controllers, and it's really cool. It sort of takes the experience, that it makes it a bit more visceral, you know, in your hands with the controller.
Were there any sort of like noteworthy? Because I know they always like to sort of talk about the DualSense features and stuff, but were there any like noteworthy uses of it? Because I feel like in some games, on PlayStation 5 specifically, some games use it more just like a rumble, whereas some games use it in quite inventive ways. Like Astro's Playroom used it really well, Returnal used it really well, where you've kind of got that like half press, like full press to kind of like, you know, you actually just genuinely do feel things. So like, do you feel like there was any sort of engagements or parts throughout the game where like that was actually used to like a really good degree, or was it more just like a better rumble kind of thing?
I feel like it's really hard for me to like pinpoint exact things, and I also didn't use all the weapons that the game has to offer, because the way that the game works is you upgrade. You have to like choose what weapons you want to upgrade, right? You don't get enough materials to max out everything. So there were things that I basically didn't really touch, like the bow. So in retrospect, I kind of wish I tried it out so that I could say like, oh, it was actually really satisfying to draw back the bow, kind of like how it is in like Horizon games, right? But it felt tactile, it felt nice. It did feel like an improvement in terms of like what you're doing in game versus what the controller's doing. Also, like, you have like the thing where like the flashlight can randomly go out and you've got like shake your controller, and that's like just a nightmare when you're being attacked by the clickers. So that was really nice. True. There's also speaking of changes as well, if you remember, if you played part 2, the QTE, the QuickTime events, were different than in the original, and they've basically used the part 2 version of the QTEs, which largely is the same. Like, you're doing the same thing, but the UI expressing how you're doing it is different. It's just a little bit more clearer. It's just a bit more nicer, to be honest. So I appreciated that small detail as well. It just sort of made it a bit more modernized, especially with part 2.
Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense because, I mean, you'd like to think in most situations people would have played part 1 and then gone into part 2. But as is often the case, sometimes when people discover like a new franchise for the first time, sometimes it might just be that everyone's talking about it. Like, obviously, whether you like it or not, there was a lot of discourse around Last of Us Part 2 when it first came out. So I'm sure there were lots of people that were just like heard people talking about it and might have just jumped straight into part 2. So if you were then like, if you did discover, even though that would be like reading the end of the game, the end of a book before you start it. But anyway, if anyone did that and they were like, well, actually, I want to go back and play part 1, I feel like this obviously would be a smoother transition, because then you just be playing like a game that sort of feels like legitimately the part 1 of the second one you played, versus sometimes this happens. Sometimes people discover a new franchise, they play the new one, they're like, oh, this is hella cool, and then they go back and it's like, well, I can appreciate the older ones, but because obviously they didn't play at the time, they don't have the sort of nostalgia attachment. Because I do find that like this is one of the things that I've sort of found speaking to a lot of people, like when it comes to going back to playing older games, if you have the previous attachment having played it, you can just like the
nostalgia goggles.
It doesn't bother you. Like if the controls are a little bit funky, you're like, it's fine, I can still remember this. But if somebody new tries to go back, they're just like, I can't do it. Like it's weird. So I do think that is really cool. Were there any other like
just on
mechanics?
that point, I want to say, for me personally, I feel like this part 1 remake is basically like the best definitive experience for Last of Us. Like, I played the original, played the remaster. I'm not going to lie, the remaster still holds up today. You could still play that and have a ton of fun. It's not like you're going to be like cringing at textures and things. Like, some of them are obviously like getting a little dated, but the game still holds up in the remaster. In the remaster. But now with the remake, it's like this is what you want. This is what you want when you're playing it. You want that fidelity, you want the characters to look really good, you want the like modernized QTE, the increased accessibility options as well that are in this remake. So I really do think like, if you're someone that's likes Last of Us and you're like, I haven't played since I played the original, but I did really enjoy it, that when you come around to thinking, I want to play Last of Us again, I honestly think it is worth playing this version of it. It does feel really good.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that definitely, like, from what I've sort of seen from like some of the footage that you sort of shared and stuff, and obviously in the video we'll throw in a few like comparisons and stuff. Like, there's definitely it does look like it really is very impressive, and especially depending on unless you're someone that's like you, that's sort of like a ultra fan who's played through like 3 or 4 times. Some people may not have genuinely played like part 1 for years, right? So it could actually be a good chance to like jump back in and stuff, which would be
that's
really cool.
That's another thing I want to mention as well is the remaster to the remake, because I have seen comments online saying like it didn't need this, like the remaster is still good, and it does still hold up. But I think when people are online and they're cherry picking certain screenshots to compare, it doesn't represent the differences between the game. I played the remaster. There'll be footage of the remaster in the video versus the remake, so that you guys can see the comparison. I've literally played both, like very, very recently, like in the last days. There is a difference. The textures are different. The characters do look different. When you're talking about like pre-rendered cutscenes with like nice lighting, and you're trying to compare it against, from the remaster to the remake, like it doesn't look like in a still image like that there is a world of difference. But the lighting is better. The textures are better. It is there, even though in those cherry-picked screenshots it doesn't necessarily look like it is. But when you're playing it, you do notice it.
Yeah. That is, I mean, it's 100%. That is just like it is a really, really nice experience to sort of play through. And as you say, like if you are jumping into it new, maybe you've sort of been waiting for a while, then this would definitely be the perfect place to jump in. But it's also worth mentioning, I know like you haven't necessarily had a chance to run through these too much, but they have added a few like new features as well, right? A few things that kind of people can run through. It's supposed to have like a sort of like a speed run, like a permadeath mode, right? Can you sort of touch on that a little bit?
I haven't tried these out myself, but these will be in the game. There's a speedrun mode that you can basically enable that will essentially track your current playtime, your personal best per chapter, and it will also let you know the name of the current chapter that you're in. Which, so like speedrunning scene, we love the speedrunning scene. This is just going to make it so much easier for them. And when you're talking about like going into New Game Plus or something, permadeath, like now we're getting serious, that's for the hardcore players. But it's just nice that these things are added in. And to circle back for a sec, the game, like I have said it before, but the game is still the same in terms of its plot and like the fact like that you're going with Ellie to the Fireflies. There isn't like, you're not going to be suddenly going to some like whole brand new area that you've never seen before, but that isn't really what you want, because like in my opinion the original Last of Us is kind of like a masterpiece and is like a classic now of its time. So it's the updated visuals, certain areas have changed, the characters look so much better, these new accessibility, QTE's been added in, some new features like we're talking about, the speed run and the permadeath mode. And also the new, like when you're upgrading your weapons and you get to see like the animations now, like in part 2 how they had like really nice animations for upgrading your weapons. It's just so nice.
Nice. Oh, that sounds awesome, honestly. Like, I genuinely, I mean, as you say, like, I think it's ultimately, although something like Final Fantasy Remake has obviously got a very different direction, generally speaking, when you are remastering, remaking, re-envisioning the game, well, not re-envisioning, but remaking and remastering, that is what you want, right? You want it true to the original experience. You just want to go back and be able to enjoy what you loved, but just looking hella crispy, which is basically what it does.
And I'll say one thing, because I think this is important. In my playthrough on PlayStation 5, I have not encountered any bugs or glitches. That isn't to say that there aren't any there, like I can only speak from my experience, but I didn't encounter any, and so it came across as a very polished and clean experience, which, considering that this is not a port, this is like, ground up remake, I thought that was impressive, because I didn't encounter any like graphical or bugs or anything like that.
Yeah, especially like these days in gaming, you like even in some of the most polished studios, there tends to be a couple of hiccups here and there. So that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
So there we have it. There's a little like kind of rundown on the sort of Paradise impressions, having sort of gone hands-on through the entire game, and obviously showing you guys some of the comparisons as well. If you have any questions about it, do by all means let us know in the comments down below. If there's anything else you want to know, similarly let us know. But otherwise, if you've missed some of the recent videos, be sure to check out one of these ones. You can check out gameplay part 1 on the channel if you want to see the start of the game with, of course, no VO, no kind of talking over it, so you can just enjoy that and watch the crispy visuals. But otherwise, thanks for joining us, Paradise, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Bye-bye.